To get started, welcome everyone. My name's Aditi and I'm the president of CCA. Now, before we dive deeper into the world of entrepreneurship, I'm just going to be going through a few housekeeping items. Firstly, we request you keep yourself on mute, although we do encourage you to leave your cameras on because we would love to interact with you. If you have any questions for our speakers, both during the presentations and the Q&A panel, shoot them over to Patrick, our wonderful IT director, and he will send them on to our MC. Finally, to have the best experience, please make sure that you do have speaker view enabled, just so then we can highlight or spotlight the individual that's currently talking. Now, Entrepreneurship Evening ran for the very first time last year, and we are so excited to run it again this year. Whilst we don't have the drinks or the bite-sized bagels this time, I'm sure it'll still be an incredible night. Last year's discussion revolved around machine learning, personal branding, and empowerment. I'm really excited to see what this year's speakers talk about. So there are so many Australians that are constantly innovating, whether it be Canva with their graphic design platform or even Atlassian with the product management tools. Today, we have an opportunity to hear from amazing speakers that are part of the Melbourne startup community. And in fact, one of those speakers is our very own Nathaniel Diong. Nathaniel started his company, Future Minds Network, at the age of 17. He is an award-winning social entrepreneur and runs one of Australia's top startup accelerators for teen entrepreneurs. As a former member of the CCA committee and active member of Melbourne's startup community, Nathaniel joins us tonight. So I'm going to pass it over to Nathaniel to get this event underway.
Awesome. Thank you for that wonderful intro, Didi. And it's like an absolute pleasure to be here. So to everyone who's just tuning in, I'll be your MC for tonight. I'm Nathaniel. I wear many hats, quite literally and figuratively. And in the waking hours, I'm a student. In the nighttime, I'm not Batman, but I am, as Aditi said, the founder of Future Minds Network. And we work around empowering youth through social entrepreneurship. And so as you'll realize throughout the course of tonight, I am obsessed with it. Like, not just because the words sound cool, but because I believe there's a true beauty in entrepreneurship. To some, I know entrepreneurship may seem like a foreign word or something that is a bit intimidating or quite scary to jump into. But to me, it's simply a medium to turn ideas into reality and to revolutionize the old into new. And so this evening, we'll be exploring the various aspects of entrepreneurship, what it takes to be a founder, what it takes to build a startup, and what it takes to take the first step. And so we're joined by Helena Fern from The Generator, Leo Gui from inGeniousAI, and Shiraj de Silva from FirstStep. I know learning more about like Helena, Leo, and Shiraj in the breakout room before, they've all had such invaluable experiences in the startup space, and they're going to add so much value to all those tuning in. So to kick it off, what we're going to do is hear from each of our wonderful panelists in a series of lightning talks. And so putting you on the spot, Leo, the first speaker we'll be inviting up to the stage is you. To give a bit more context, Leo is the co-founder of inGeniousAI, a startup that brings engaging chatbot experiences on a platform built for professional content creators. inGeniousAI is powering some of the most popular bots here in Australia, including NAB, Queensland Health's COVID-19, TaxBot, and World Vision's 40-hour famine. So coming from a technical background, Leo Gui is passionate at finding the right problems to solve in a minimal and unique way. Prior to this, Leo was co-founder of Sloth, a productivity app which was featured globally as one of Apple's best new apps. Leo is also a member and active participant of Facebook Developer Circle Melbourne and Startup Grind Global Community for Entrepreneurs. Please welcome Leo to the stage. Over to you.
Oh, awesome. Thank you very much for the awesome introduction, Nathaniel. And hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you guys all had, coping well with what's happening around. So I'd like to just quickly share my screen. So tonight, rather than bore you with the startup theories and everything, I thought it would be actually valuable for me simply just to share the learnings I accumulated through the years. Some of them, hopefully, it will apply to you. Not everything I envisage, but those are the, essentially the things that I find will be useful. And if I had a chance to go over and do this startup again, those are the things I would definitely do differently. So, okay, now a bit of a background about myself. So around 10 years ago, I was sitting where you guys are, at a university, as a typical computer science students. I loved programming, always, really got my interest in, UIs, creating really cool animations, user interfaces, and making awesome, experiences for the end user. And the other thing you should know about me is I hated working for someone else. Always had ideas, say, hey, I want to be my own boss. I want to, do something. I don't know what it is, but I always have the urge for that. So, when I was about 10, 20, I started my first startup with my co-founder back in Wellington, New Zealand. Now that startup grew from a team of two to a team of 70 people in 3.5 years time, which is pretty crazy. Was it enjoyable? Yes, to an extent. Was it hard work? Yes. Would I do that again? Probably no. To recall, we probably made all the mistakes that you would have think that everyone would have made along the journey. So that was me in my early 20s. And then I thought, hey, it'd be awesome to travel around the world. So went to the States, found a whole bunch of other people, created a few different apps. One of them is called Sloth, which is a very simple app that allow you to do to-do list meets countdown timer. So you have a list of to-do tasks and you put a timer against it, and then it helps you constrain your timekeeping. So that kind of got a little bit of success out of it. Learned a whole bunch of things to do with marketing, social media management, and the whole lot. And so, hey, that's kind of cool. And let's try that again. But unfortunately, being a Kiwi myself, on my visa wouldn't allow me to stay in the States. So guess what? Australia, let's make it home. So came over about 4 years ago, and back in the days where chatbot was still very much a mythical thing, where everyone think it's a magic thing that the bot has personalities that just act like another human. And then I thought, hey, wouldn't it be cool to create a tool that enables developer to very quickly build these kind of chatbots. 3 years down the track, and turns out that problem is completely wrong. In fact, it was the content creators that we need to empower. So just to give you an idea of, often when you see a problem, it don't necessarily is the problem you want to solve, or the problem that gets you product market fit. So it's important to keep an open mind. Right, so that's me. Now the first point I want to come across and I want to kind of get across is that you see every day and different media that, hey, being an entrepreneur is cool, you need to do it now, you need to get started today, all of that. But what I found is that it's perfectly fine not to be an entrepreneur from day one. Some of the very well-known entrepreneurs, they wasn't entrepreneur. They didn't set out to say, hey, I'm going to study entrepreneur, I'm going to do this, I'm going to build that. It's often that throughout their life experience, they came across something that inspired them, or something that absolutely pushed them to do something about it. And then, so my point for this is that it's perfectly fine okay not to have an idea of some kind, get out there, talk to people, and experiencing the what the world has to offer. And I'm sure along the way you will come across something that will inspire you to to create a company or to get you started on the journey of being an entrepreneur. Now the other thing, being a typical developer, is that back in my early 20s, creating something, building an app, building a website, it's very, very easy to do. So guess what? Whenever I had an idea, I'll simply lock myself in the basement, didn't talk to anyone for 3 months, and smashed out a website, a web app, and native app and whatnot, and then put it out onto the internet. And guess what happens? Nobody wants it. Right. So if I will, get the chance to do this over again, the very first thing I would do is talk to people. If you had a choice of, like, just say, having the capability of, and the skill of making something versus having a awesome network of people to help you validate something, I will 100% choose the people, choose the network, because knowing the right people, having that asset at your disposal is absolutely valuable, especially for early startups where you want to quickly validate certain ideas, whether they work or not. So please talk to people. Now, stumble upon a problem kind of reflects what I have said early on, which is you don't come across a problem. You don't just set out to say, hey, I want to solve this problem. All the problems that I personally all the problems I've discovered came to me through my daily life, whether there is something I have to do to solve a problem. But through the process, I found, hey, it's very difficult, let's just say, to do authentication, to manage your password, to having a decent online communication or online meeting or whatnot. You get to experience problems in all sorts of different ways in your career and on your during the day. So just be very mindful of spotting those problems, and always keep an open mind, saying, hey, is there a better way of doing something, or why is everyone doing this thing the same way? There's got to be a better way of doing something. So keep an open mind. Now, one thing, all the TV shows you see out there, they glorify and romanticize, being an entrepreneur as this people, they, kind of like work hard, they party hard and whatnot. But in reality, I'm sure you've understood and you've read it on the internet, where 90% of the time you don't get to see the hard work that the people has put in behind it. So again, just want to emphasize that it's a very, very tough journey, and most people won't get to experience what you have to go through. And the other aspect is luck, aka timing. So the example I want to give here is the Zoom app you are using right now. Before the whole COVID-19, Zoom was just one of the one of the solutions that you can use for doing meetings online. But afterwards, it absolutely skyrocketed, and just because of one feature, and that feature is custom background. So again, luck and timing absolutely plays a key to the success of any startup. Unfortunately, it's not something that you can control. And that's where whole persistence comes in. For my current startup, we didn't really get major traction for the first 2 years until the third year, where people in the company start to paying attention in the whole chatbot and automation space. So yeah, don't give up. Now this is my last slide. Get started. Again, come back to the idea of beginning to think and be mindful and keeping an open mind about the things around you. It doesn't mean that you need to go out there and start building something today. It just means that be very mindful of the what you do on a daily basis, and keep an open mind and keep questioning the things that you are doing. And I'm sure throughout your study, throughout your early career, you will come across something that you believe is worth solving, and that's where it's a very good place to get started on your entrepreneurship, which is finding that problem, talking to people, and start solving it. And that brings to the concluding my presentation. So hopefully that was helpful. You can reach me on the email on the left bottom corner.
Awesome.
So I'm gonna stop share.
Thanks so much, Leo. Like, I really relate to wanting to be your own boss. And I love the message that you don't have to be an entrepreneur from day one. I feel like in this time, there's a sort of pressure that we have to optimize whatever time that we have today. And we have to learn a new skill or build a startup in this time, or else our time's wasted. So that's a really cool point that you brought up straight away. And you gave some really good tips on what we should actually do to get started. Like, for example, talking to people, and how, your network is essentially your net worth, and really prioritizing that is what's important to get your startup idea out there. And even talking about stumbling upon a problem and really falling in love with that before you start with a solution, and with persistence and luck. So thanks for those really practical tips. I just wanted to say as well that if anyone ever had any questions as we go through the speakers, feel free to message Pat. So he's the IT director of CCA, and he'll just be collecting all the questions, and we can answer them in the panel a bit later. But thanks again, Leo. That was awesome.
So, no worries. Thanks, Nathaniel.
Awesome. The second speaker we have tonight for a quick lightning talk is Helena Fern. So Helena leads the Generator, the startup hub at Monash Uni, and has been part of the team since 2016. So her role is to design the programs, work across the entrepreneurial community at Monash, and provide support to startups. So she also helps a lot in setting the direction of the Generator to maximize its impact on young entrepreneurs at Monash. Helena has been working in the university startup space since 2009, both in the UK and Australia. She has a Bachelor in Fine Art and postgrad in marketing. So over to you, Helena.
Awesome, thank you. And thank you, Leo, for paving the way for some of the points that I'm going to cover as well. Before I figure out how to share my screen and do all the tech, yeah, I'm Helena. I run the Generator, so I've been part of that team for 4 years now. And in that time, we've helped hundreds of students and staff and alumni of Monash get their ideas off the ground. So I guess our sort of big value proposition is that we help people take that first step into getting their idea off the ground. And then we support you along the journey, whether that first idea fails, we'll support you through the second idea, through the third idea. Essentially, we're there to help you at whatever time entrepreneurial bug strikes you. But yeah, our sort of bread and butter is in helping more ideas get off the ground at Monash. So I'm going to share my screen. What I'm going to share with you today is really some of the common things that we see at the Generator around the different students and ideas that come in to get advice from us. And I'm going to try and choose the right screen. Okay. Can everyone see that? Yep, good. Nodding heads.
Yep.
Awesome. And I'm going to try and go to PDF. I'm not used to presenting off PDFs. So just a little bit about the generator. We're located centrally at Monash. There's a picture up that's got some building work in there because this is actually our new space that we were meant to move into in April, and it's sitting empty and waiting for all of the students and great innovators to come back on campus. So at the moment we've got this absolutely shiny brand spanking new space with no one in it. So that's something to look forward to when you get back to campus to come and hang out with us there. But we are really there to help provide some education around what are the steps to actually getting an idea off the ground, what are some of the things I need to know about launching a startup. We have a lot of people either in our team or around our team that have experience as entrepreneurs. So we do office hours, which is a 30-minute consultation to get advice around your idea and help navigate what the milestones are that you need to set for yourself. We also have this amazing space, so that's open to anyone who is part of our programs to work from as a co-working space. And what most people are interested in, and I'll cover this a little bit at the end, is we also provide seed funding. So small grants up to from $1,000 up to $10,000 to really help make that early stage of launching a startup a bit more possible. Because at some stage in launching your startup, things will cost money, and students tend not to have too much money. So we try and help give you some of that funding to get you on the way. But I will talk about what you have to do to actually get that funding. So one of the most common questions that we get asked is, how do you come up with a good idea? And for us, the answer is often that you don't. And I'm going to show you the first sort of tool that Leo's probably recognized before. The reason you don't come up with a good idea is because you actually have to build it. So everything that Leo said before around inspiration striking is true. Like, you need to start with a problem that you want to solve. But essentially you just have to get started, because what you think is the solution in your mind at the start is going to be totally different to what it actually is once you start getting it into the hands of users and customers, because they will tell you what's valuable and what's not, and your product or your service will change. And so this is a feedback loop that's used in the startup space. It's called the build, measure, learn feedback loop. And it's essentially about building a whole bunch of tests, measuring what people, how your customers and users interact with it, and then using that interaction to build the next iteration. So as IT people, as entrepreneurial people, it should come naturally. Surprisingly, it doesn't to a lot of people, but this is something to keep in mind, that it's that constant cycle. And so one of the things that, and it's probably the most important thing that we try and teach, is to help people learn how to define the problem properly. And I can't tell you how many times, it's probably 90% of the time when people come and see us, they often have the end solution in mind already. Quite often they've done what Leo did in his early days, and they've locked themselves in a basement for 3 months and built this beautiful, app or platform or prototype. And then they've come into us and shown it, and we're like, wow, that's technically really impressive. But what do you actually know about the people that are going to buy this, or the people that are going to use this? And there's a really strong assumption from these creators, especially if you're like, if this is your first time doing it, there's a really strong assumption that it'll work. Like, you'll put it out into the world and it'll get adopted, and you'll be like this Kickstarter superstar. But the reality is that without engaging with those end users before you actually code or design or build anything, the chance is that you've missed a really key component of understanding the problem that they're facing, and you've built something that they may not actually want. And so it could be a lot of wasted time. And and perseverance is absolutely critical, because if you have wasted that time, you do need to go back and go back to the drawing board and rebuild it. But it's really important to define the problem. And I thought I'd sort of try and entertain you a little bit, because if you don't define the problem, you might end up inventing something that looks a little bit like this, which we all want to try and avoid. But surprisingly, I've seen some very interesting things come to the generator from inventors that, are definitely along the lines of a sort of Velcro headband. So we want to try and avoid you wasting time and money doing that. So the first thing we say, and I think, it sort of reiterates Leo's point, is that you really do need to speak to people. You need to understand the people that are going to interact with your app or platform or whatever you build, because they're actually going to help give you the design spec to build it. And I'm going to talk about one case which hopefully is quite recognisable to Monash, because this is something that came through the generator. And sorry, Leo, I keep referring to you, but it's actually a chatbot, so you'll probably like this too. So this is the team from a AI chatbot designed and launched at Monash University by Monash students, called Jeffrey. And I can't see everyone, but I'd love to know how many people actually have interacted with Jeffrey, because this really took Monash by storm last year. And I think it's a really great example of, student-led ideas that could, turn into a startup at any point. But the team from Jeffrey had been ideating about different ideas. They wanted to build a little device that was tracking delivery services, and then they looked at a finance system. And so they were sort of going around looking at different ideas. And while they were looking at all these ideas, they realised that their grades were slipping because they were spending too much time trying to be entrepreneurs and not enough time being students. And so what they realised was that in their studies, they were missing all of the opportunities to get the small 5%, 10% grades, for doing little quizzes or turning up to a lecture or whatever. And so they thought, well, why don't we look at building something that helps people figure out, based on the grades they've got so far, how do I optimize the rest of my time at uni to get the maximum grades for what's left? And so they were their own customers. And I think that's really important when you're sort of going down this path, is if you suffer from the problem yourself, you're going to easily find other people that suffer from it too. So your peer groups, and you're going to really deeply understand it. And so they essentially scraped all of the course information from Monash's publicly available course guides and created a chatbot through Facebook Messenger, which is a platform they use because they knew all of their friends had it. So again, understanding the problem, understanding the customer users, they built this chatbot in a place that was really accessible. And they launched it on Stalker Space, and within a week they had something like 7,000 users, and all of these users were basically telling them what they needed the features of this product to be, and that's how they kind of built Jeffrey. And so Jeffrey's definitely not a complete startup yet. They've had a lot of interest and some contracts from Monash to build bespoke chatbots, and so it's really it's gone from something that was just really highly adopted because they built it based on a problem they really understood, and then those users told them, the next features, and now they're sort of figuring out, well, what does this actually look like in a startup format? But it's a really good example of something that actually took probably a month to do. So a week and a half to come up with the idea, a week or so to launch it, and then the adoption kind of built the rest of it. So really great example, and we want to see more of these innovations at Monash. Some of the stuff I got asked to talk about is the whole getting funding and being an investor ready. So we get asked for sort of seed funding and grants quite a bit from different teams at Monash. And we also have connections with venture capital investors and other seed stage investors around Australia. And we've had quite a few of our startups go on and get venture capital funding as well. And so I wanted to just cover some like quick top tips around what you need to show to start looking at getting investment. And we'd look at it in the same way as an investor. The only thing is at Monash, we don't want to make a financial return, so we're a little bit more flexible. But essentially, we want startups to be investor friendly. So we'd still look at those same kind of metrics. So these are just some really quick top tips I'm going to go through. The first one that an investor would ask is why you and why now? And so the timing that Leo mentioned is a really good example of why now. Like, what's the competitor landscape like? What's protectable or defensible about what you're building that no one else can kind of compete with you? But why you is really about you as a founder. And the first part of that is, do you care about this problem so much that you're willing to spend 7 years of your life trying to solve it? Because that's the average age of a startup in that whole cycle of investment, growth, and then exit. And the second part of that is, how coachable are you? So will you take advice? Will you be open to having good mentors? Will you try and solve problems on your own? So they're all the things that we look at. The second part is, what evidence do you have? And this comes back to not sitting in a room or a basement for 3 months and building something, but actually getting out there and getting it in the hands of people. So Jeffrey isn't a fully formed startup yet, the example I used earlier, but it's got a huge amount of users, and they are having discussions with investors because they're saying, how did you do that? Like, what did you do to get, I think after like 3 weeks, they had 17,000 Monash students on it. So they had huge adoption. And I think that there's a lot of value and evidence around that. It might be that you have a prototype that has some kind of patentability that's been tested. Or the other thing, and it's less likely for a student to have this, but if you have track record, like you've done 2 or 3 failed projects before, and this is your 4th project, and an investor or a later stage program might say, okay, I can see like you've had some pretty good lessons, so I'm willing to put my money into you because I think you'll figure this out. So that's the evidence that they're looking for. And the third one is really looking at the market. So is the market that you're in growing? No investor's going to invest in something in a shrinking market. But if the market is quite small, then they'll look at how expensive the problem is to solve. So manufacturing and 3D printing is a really great example of a very expensive problem in those markets. So there's a lot of investment going into that, or energy as an example. So I'm just going to finish off. I think if you're tuning in, just take a screenshot of this. That's probably the best way to have it in your back pocket. But this is actually really about diagnosing, if you have an idea, where do you fit into generator type programs? Because we do have different programs for different stages. So we run lots of events. We also share lots of events that are running. So if you're just curious, do more things like this. But if you have an idea, then we have a program called The Validator. It's all online now because we've transitioned ourselves. And it's free, and actually all you need is an idea or a problem that you want to solve. And so definitely get in touch with us if you are interested in taking it a bit further. And then we've got later stage programs, so take a screenshot and see where you fit into that. The final thing, that's not the final thing. I'll talk you through it. If you do want to chat through any of your ideas, just jump onto our website, which is monash.edu/entrepreneurship. We have office hours, so those 30-minute advice sessions every day. through Zoom. So if you want to chat through it with any one of us, you can book yourself in through our website and speak to any of us about your idea. So hopefully we'll see a few of you coming through that. But that's me. Thanks for listening, and yeah, I'm looking forward to the Q&A at the end.
Love that. Thanks so much, Helena. You covered some really great points in defining the problem. And definitely with the students that I work with as well, it's all about falling in love with the problem before the solution. And it really has to be drilled into your brain, because it can be so easy when you've created something so amazing, you automatically fall in love with it. You're like, this has to be the thing that gets me there. So that's a really awesome point that you brought up. And really interesting to see what you're looking for in the generator as well, like in terms of why you and why now. Like, do you really care about it that much that for the next 7 years, you're going to commit whatever your life to it, and whatever energy you have, and even, you know, having the evidence there, having the user base, and finally the market opportunity. So that's really awesome. And it's funny you mentioned Jeffrey as well, because I think CCA has collaborated with them recently, and they have their own event stream. I think Aditi was texting me before about you could find your upcoming CCA opportunities with them. So if you type in CCA opportunities in Jeffrey, you can see all the events coming up and their sponsors. So that's something you can try out now as well. But awesome. Thanks for that, Helena. So our third speaker for today is Shiraj. So we're going to pass it over to him. He's had over 6 years of extensive knowledge in strategy, financial modeling, data analytics, and management consulting. So Shiraj is a certified public accountant and is the co-founder of FirstStep, a Melbourne-based fintech startup that has developed a mobile app that helps everyday Australians save. And so FirstStep is devoted to designing and delivering powerful tech that reimagines investing and helps shape a growing community realize new possibilities. Shiraj also founded Global Consulting Group, which is a student-led organization centered around non-for-profit consulting. So welcome to the stage, Shiraj.
Thank you, guys. Can you hear me? I think
Yes.
you can. Awesome. Thanks for having me. Thanks for that introduction as well. So I thought I'd spend sort of the first half of it speaking about my experiences with FirstStep, and sort of the second half where I currently am at, and sort of go through my background as well. So initially, I have a background in management consulting at firms like PwC and Accenture, and spent a number of years doing, financial modeling and data analytics, across a range of clients. And then I sort of had this inkling that I wanted to do a startup. So I wanted to be my own boss, as is common. And I went on to find, I suppose, a team of people that I wanted to work with and had, appropriate skills in, tech and finance and all sorts of areas, in order to sort of build upon FirstStep. So FirstStep started out because we sort of had this idea that we wanted to make investing accessible for young people effectively. And what we found was that a lot of people don't invest because of large minimums, and probably a lack of knowledge around investing as well. And we spent a number of years researching the idea. We got into the University of Sydney's accelerator program called Incubate, which taught us a lot about, speaking to potential customers and researching the market and testing ideas. And thereafter, we joined the University of Melbourne's accelerator program called MAP, which is sort of a 6-month program where they assign you with mentors and advisors and take you through a fairly stringent program, getting your startup out there. And as part of that process, we raised funding. So we raised sort of over $1 million from angel investors, with a view sort of, expand FirstStep. And one of the things we sort of realized over the process was that the sort of costs of running this sort of business was quite onerous. So we actually created a managed investment scheme. So like a retail investment fund where money comes in and we track people's bank transactions and we invest roundup. So we thought this was quite a passive way for people to invest their funds and make it sort of an automated process using an app, a mobile app, with a fairly simple sign-up process. And so we sort of did that process where we took it out to market. We ran a fund. We built pretty nice looking mobile app, and we sort of one of the things that was happening at the time was there were sort of fairly large competitors and they were well funded. And we realized that we had to sort of scale back this idea because our costs were extremely high. And we sort of realized that we needed to pivot this idea. So we then went on to sort of effectively shutting down the mobile app, but we realized that we could work with large financial services institutions from a business to business perspective. To license our software as opposed to going direct to consumer. So that was like, a fairly tough process in terms of moving, your product away from a retail customer product to one where we partner directly with large organizations and provide our software to them in a white label sort of solution. So that was quite a long journey, and we learned a lot of things over that time, pivoting in multiple directions, which is a common reality, I suppose, in startups, where what you think you want to do is not necessarily what's needed in the market, or at the same time there's competitors that come in who are with a much larger sort of war chest than you have, and doing sort of very similar ideas, and then you sort of have to pivot and find different avenues to make things work. And then sort of subsequent to that, I sort of, for personal reasons, had to leave FirstStep, so I'm no longer with FirstStep, but I have recently been sort of contracting out time, so working in consulting sort of jobs for a while, and I've recently joined a startup as well, so sort of a more established startup which works in sort of autonomous vehicles. So I thought I'd take you guys through a presentation that we sort of have put together that sort of explains what my latest startup is. So I joined sort of at the start of this year, so I've been there for a few months, working on sort of an electric car effectively. So I'll just share my screen. Hope you guys can see this. Share. Can everyone see this? Can I just get a confirmation? I think it looks like it's sharing. Yeah, that's awesome. Sharing. Cool. So this is my latest. So this is the company I'm at the moment. It's called AEV Robotics, which is applied electric vehicles. And the mission of the business is to unlock autonomous technology and make it commercial. We are currently focused on getting a robotic electronically controlled base, and I'll go through some of those concepts as well, but I wanted to sort of set a scene here first that talks about a bit of history. Let me just go down. Yeah, so some of these slides talk about technology evolving very quickly and how the world can change really quickly in a really short period of time. So this is 1900 in New York, Fifth Avenue, and that picture shows a large, almost like a sea of horses, right? And the challenge here is to find the car in this sea of horses, right? So there is one little car there, and fast forward 13 years to 1913, and what you see is a sea full of cars, effectively, right? And here the challenge is to find the horse, right? So there was a rapid change within 13 years where an industry of transport completely changed from one of complete, horse-drawn transport to, motorized vehicles. And eventually what happened after all of this is that a lot of the horses eventually became horse meat. So a lot of these horses actually, which is sad, but, ended up being eaten, right? So this is the idea of technology disruption and, innovation happening really fast. Another term for this is sort of S curves and growth curves and exponential growth curves, which we've seen recently, I suppose, most recently in things like, COVID and its infection rates, or Zoom, as has been discussed before, or even things like, social media and that sort of stuff. So the mission is to sort of get to, 2030, where there is a more sort of sustainable, electrified transport system, basically. So this is sort of the future of sustainable living. So currently we have a lot of congested roads, analog manual cars, very complex road systems, very dirty, pollution and high speed and very dangerous transport situations at the moment. And increasingly, this sort of slide shows you that the impact of speed on fatality rates in cars. So for example, 20 miles per hour results in a 10% fatality, and 40 miles per hour, which is about 65 k's per hour, is about 80% fatality rate. So increasingly in places like New York, there's a rapid increase towards low speed vehicles. This is a map of Melbourne, and on the right there's London, where a large proportion of London, and even you can get from one end of the Melbourne city almost to the other side in 40-kilometer zone. So low speed is becoming increasingly popular in some of the most populated places in the world. And also globally, this number probably is a bit out of date, but $80 billion is spent on autonomous vehicle development. But it looks like this, right? So this is where you retrofit an existing vehicle, and it costs, $100,000 to $200,000, even $250,000 to retrofit a car like this with autonomous capability, where you remove all the pedals and that sort of stuff, all the all the mechanical systems, and you put in autonomous sort of radars and lidars and sensors and that sort of stuff. So there isn't a digital vehicle to support this autonomous electrified world. So what AV is working on is a robotically controlled EV base, which is that thing on the bottom right, to see the commercialization of autonomous driving technology faster, and is trying to be not just a car company, but a technology company as well. This one goes through this is like an analogy to say that the base can fit a number of customizable pods on top of it. So you can have transport pods, you can have delivery pods, you can have medical equipment pods, you could have mining rigs, you could have restaurants or shopping centers that come to your house. So different takes in terms of what's possible. So you have this platform, and on top of the platform, you have a number of applications making it a scalable business. So effectively, you can make the same base, or you can have sort of roughly slightly changed versions of the base. And then you can have these customizable applications on top of it. So this is actually a car in Japan that the company made. And AV launched at CES, which is a computer electronics show in the US, and that was quite popular. These are just some articles which talks about it. So the idea is sort of a modular, scalable, autonomous electric, programmable base that can work in an autonomous electrified future. These are just some slides, some pictures of all the possible options and designs that this sort of future of transport can look like. So things like mining out in, big mining companies, or passenger pods, or medical equipment, or just, another passenger pod on the left there. And that's just like another picture of the base. I think that's pretty much it. So I thought that might be an interesting thing for you guys to have a look at. So that's me, and happy to take questions later on.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Shiraj. It was really good to get insight into like AAV robotics. Basically, like being able to customize your own ride. That's pretty cool, and really love that. So thanks for sharing. So you might have seen that there've been some questions popping up throughout the chat. So what's going to happen right now is we're going to move into a panel discussion where we can answer all of your burning questions. But just some quick housekeeping before that. You might see there's a Zoom chat function. So if you click on that, there's an option to message Pat, who's IT director at CCA. And if you have any questions at all during the discussion, like please keep messaging Pat. I think we've had quite a few at the moment, and we'll get back to them like as soon as we can. And just for anyone tuning in, if you could keep your microphones off during the segment, it'd be great. I might just dive straight into it. Let's see what we have here. So there was a question to Leo. You emphasized on how the work in a startup can often be quite hard. What kept you driven and determined in this time?
I'm going to unmute. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, excellent. So, it's a very good question, and there isn't a particular answer. Everyone's different. For me, particularly, it was just really, you have to be very interested in solving that problem, or that problem has to have some sort of personal resonance with you to keep you, going through the downtimes, and to keep you wanting to jumping out of your bed first thing in the morning. And on top of that, I love gym, so that always helps when it take my mind off what I have to do. So, everyone is different, but I think the key here is just to have that passion to solve for that problem, and that is what you needed to get you last through the low point, which everyone would have experienced during their entrepreneurship.
That's cool. And I'm interested, Shiraj, on your perspective here as well, because I know that you've had a break from the startup world and suddenly you're back in. So what's been keeping you determined and motivated there?
It's interesting. So I think I have a strong interest in building a sort of sustainable, cleaner future. Like one of the things I've been interested in for a long time is sort of, electric cars and Tesla and that sort of stuff as well. So one, I suppose, to even sort of find a electric car company in Melbourne is quite cool. Like I didn't even know there was one, to be honest. So and doing sort of quite an innovative idea, and having like a fairly skilled team. Like there are some pretty experienced professionals at the company. So I think that sort of helped me a lot in terms of getting back into something which is much higher risk than working for larger companies, I suppose. So I think it helps to sort of have that sort of interest in the first place, and then join something that looks quite interesting. So
that's awesome. We had a question for you as well, Helena. So we were talking about Jeffrey before, and sort of their successes there. What sort of qualities or characteristics did you find or made you believe in them, whether it was the idea or the ambition?
Yeah, I mean, they didn't have the idea that they had for Jeffrey sort of originally. I think for us, it was sort of part of it was that we'd sort of interacted with them prior, like through other events and programs. So they'd sort of like been in touch and been around, and we could kind of see that there was some ongoing interest despite, any kind of accelerator program or anything like that. So yeah, seeing someone who's genuinely interested is really important. I think one of the interesting things about them were they had that open-mindedness, but they also had that capability to build the solutions. So we knew that technically if they had to get something off the ground, they'd be able to, but also weren't closed-minded. So they were like able to kind of say, we're just curious, and we want to build something interesting and useful, but they weren't locked into that kind of, I'm going to build this solution and no one's going to tell me any other way. So that was probably the two things. When you get into an accelerator program, it does really confront you around whether or not you really, really want it. And so the Jeffrey came in as a team of 3 and left as a team of 2, because I think it's also totally fine to decide that actually this entrepreneurship path isn't for you at that time in your life. It's certainly something that you can come back to, but yeah, we just saw their tenacity throughout the program to just keep going despite how crappy it feels to have to go to a completely different idea. And I was going to just say, like, I said that you have to sort of give yourself to your idea for 7 years, but I think when you're at university, part of it is actually about experimenting and playing as well. So, ultimately, if you are going to work on something successful, it's going to take you years, not months. But it's also really important just to like have fun and play and be curious. And I think we saw that in the Jeffrey team, is that curiosity and that just absolute desire to play.
No, that's really powerful. Like really staying open-minded, and also digging into that curiosity. Like Shiraj was mentioning, his interest is basically why he's back into it, and finding something you're passionate about and falling in love with that problem, like Leo mentioned earlier as well, is so important, and it all comes back to this. And I'm really interested, you mentioned sort of your accelerator program at the Generator, and Shiraj also mentioned his time at the Incubate, which is in Sydney. What are your thoughts on sort of how essential it is to attend a program or learn from, a structured format to succeed as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, well, it's funny actually. Not many people know this about Monash and the Generator, but we were actually born out of Incubate at Sydney. So Incubate was the first accelerator that ever ran at Monash University in 2015, and that actually created the business case for the university to create the Generator. So we've got a very close friendship with James Alexander and Incubate, and he's gone on to become an investor, so that's also great. Yeah, I think so. Accelerators, the trick, the sort of secret is in the word accelerate. They're there to kind of help you learn the ropes of running a startup a lot faster than if you were going to do it on your own. You definitely don't need to go through an accelerator to be successful, and many startups haven't been through an accelerator. They're relatively new still, so they didn't exist 10 or 15 years ago. And even earlier in Australia. And so they're not going to be like the be all and end all to your success. We also have teams go through that don't do anything afterwards. So, we get it wrong too. But I think, getting like, if you want to progress, and even if you don't get into an accelerator program or whatever, like that shouldn't stop you from doing it anyway. There's so many free resources out there. You can educate yourself. You can, hit up Leo and Shiraj after this session and ask for them to be your mentors. Sorry. But, find interesting people that have experience and build that network and get advice and be open-minded. You don't need a program. It's just they're structured to help you get there faster.
Yeah, persistence in people. That's really cool. And what about you, Shiraj? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was just gonna add that it feels like a stamp of endorsement, but it doesn't necessarily mean that your business will succeed, right? Like, it definitely helps, and I think not only does it accelerate the business, it'll even accelerate you to fail, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Like, the sooner you find out that this idea is not a good idea, and the least resources you spend to find that out is a much better outcome than, like, spending a long time getting there and spending so much money to get to that point. So I think in that sense it's really helpful to figure that out sooner rather than later. So I think, yeah, that's probably what I'd add.
Yeah, totally. And it's that whole fail hard, fail fast mentality, right? Because it comes back to build, measure, learn as well from the lean startup. And if people don't know what that is, that was the diagram that Helena showed earlier. And so the author's Eric Ries, if you want to check it out. But yeah, it comes back to really testing it and validating that. And that's the whole purpose of the program of the generator, to validate like ideas at that surface level to see whether they will gain traction and have a user base. So really cool point you brought up there as well. I think on that topic of, starting early and giving that room to try, we have a question for Leo as well. Do you think it's better to start young in university or after a few years of work? Because I know you talked a lot about timing.
Yeah, absolutely. No would be my answer. I've seen a lot of successful startups and founders out there in their like 30s, 40s, and 50s. And guess what? They would have done their, in their consulting or on their, spend like 20, 30 odd years in their career and then dabbling into being an entrepreneurship and still, being very successful because, the fact that they just had that wealth of domain knowledge, of expertise in their own area. And that, again, is something that, you can't, you can't see, and that and it always helps when it comes to funding the problem. So my take on that question is, I know I had to go back to Helena. So go out there, experiment and experience. You're not going to be able to find problems to solve if you don't take that first step. So and until to a point where that you've got this problems or you've got something that makes you wouldn't want to go to sleep, and something that it could be something that annoys you so much that you think, hey, I need to do something about this. Or in the example of Jeffrey, where they went around and they did a whole bunch of, sounds like I could be wrong, they did experiment with a whole bunch of things, and then suddenly they realized that, hey, our grades are dropping because I'm not spending enough time studying. So it's and again comes back to failure. It's there, the sooner you start experimenting, testing, and trying things, the more successful you'll be in your next or the one after. So so no, you don't have to be an entrepreneur from day one. You can go into my recommendation is find a area that you really, really enjoy. Maybe you like business, maybe you like dealing with money, or you really like doing graphics or whatever. Do something you are interested, because that is what it's going to power you through the low times. That's what you need to get you out of bed in the morning.
Totally. Yeah. And I think it comes back to the theme that we touched on like at the very start, and falling in love with the problem. Like, it doesn't matter how you find it, whether you stumble on it or it's something that you experience yourself. But
when you found that problem.
Yeah, when you found that problem, like that's when you've hit gold, especially when you're your own customer as well, like in the example of Jeffrey. And I think we talked a little bit about the personalities of Jeffrey as well. And often when you hear, an entrepreneur, we think of like a certain archetype or we think of a certain person who makes an entrepreneur. So we have a question here in regards to, like, do you think that you have to be, a bit quirky or odd to think outside of the box or to be an entrepreneur? And I'd like to chuck that to Shiraj because I see him grinning over there. Putting you on the spot.
It's an interesting one. So, what my most recent experience, I saw this article somewhere that basically said that if you have an alien founder and a cult following, and a Jedi team, so three things: aliens, Jedis, and cults, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Is a good way to identify a successful startup. So if you take, so let's take Tesla for example. So like, alien founder, so Elon Musk, like a cult-like following for the product, and people love the product. And cult-like following is the number of people that love their Teslas, right? Like that sort of resonated with me, and I see some of that where I am at the moment as well. There is something there, is what I would say. Almost like an alien founder, if you can be that. There is some pattern to that, is what I would say. So I thought I found that interesting. So maybe there is something to that.
That's really cool. Yeah, maybe there's some merit there. And Helena, in the startups that you've seen in the student, entrepreneur space, have you seen a lot of alien founders and success there?
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely had some aliens through. I guess, it's really what you consider as success, because obviously Elon Musk is absolutely, dominating the world and doing very, 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 very difficult things. And I think if you're solving something that's almost impossible to solve, I definitely think you need to be a little bit crazy. And I think, some of the decisions he's been making lately, I don't think he's necessarily the poster child we should put up, pin up for everything. Because I think he's an alien. But I think we also have very humble startups that come through that just care really deeply about human health or mental health, the environment. I don't think they're aliens. I think they're very compassionate people, and I think it's that sort of compassion and that caring about the problem that sort of made them very good founders. They're solving things that aren't like what Tesla does, so it's not as crazy cuckoo, but doesn't mean they're not successful. They're having really big impact on the customers that they serve, which is in the tens of thousands, and still doing really well, but they're definitely more compassionate. So I don't think you have to be weird or strange to be creating impact, but I think if you're solving something that's really complex and big, you have to have a little bit of blind optimism, which can make you seem a bit alien to sort of normal grounded people, for sure.
Totally. And I think I've heard that a lot in the venture capitalist space. And there's this term that a lot of VCs refer to as pathological optimism. And so it's this, I guess, determination to succeed despite knowing that it's basically impossible to succeed, and doing whatever it takes to get there. So it's really interesting that both you and Shiraj brought that up as well. Leah, did you have any thoughts on this?
I think I'm just going to resonate Helen's point. And it's you had to be determined. You need to have the interest and passion.
Yeah, totally.
So
cool. We have a question for Shiraj popping in. And so I think it's around autonomous cars. So say autonomous cars do become the norm. What do you think is the next big step for cars?
I think there are two kinds of use cases. So I think one is this sort of consumer retail, high speed kind of autonomous, which is what the likes of Waymo and Tesla and so on are working on. Which requires a lot of understanding, machine learning and AI and learning models to do sort of visual and autonomy. But then I think there is this different side of things which I am sort of learning about now, which is this sort of low speed non-retail, so that sort of commercial. So imagine even things like just a whole bunch of use cases and applications become possible when it's say inside a factory or inside or at a aged care facility where you have a low speed autonomous short range vehicle that shuttles elderly around, for example, in an aged care facility. So I think the applications that we'll see will be quite large. Like, for example, one interesting one I saw about was where if you want to try on a pair of shoes, and imagine where sort of the usual brick and mortar stores stop functioning anymore, you could have these autonomous low speed vehicles come to your house, effectively drive up to your house with all these shoes which you can just get in the car and try. Obviously there's risks with that sort of stuff, but the applications are sort of endless in terms of what's possible when you have autonomy and this low speed and this sort of last mile kind of stuff. So that's some of the stuff I've been sort of seeing and sort of researching and stuff, which I think is quite interesting.
Yeah, that's really cool. And it seems that, Shiraj, I'm going to put a spotlight on you for a bit. Lots of people are interested in what you're doing. So I guess the next question following from that is around your transition from like a financial related startup to a robotics startup. Like, what was that transition like for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. You do, like, the time I spent at FirstStep, I learned so much about the financial services industry. We built fairly complex software for the industry, from investments and funds transfers and what's called unit registry software and funds management software, and then the transition to where I'm at right now is completely different, which is learning about low volume manufacturing or the costs of production of autonomous cars. And it's a completely different environment and like a steep learning curve and that sort of stuff. But there are lots of things that you learn by sort of doing a startup, which is you sort of have to do everything, right? You learn legal contracts, or you learn how to apply for grants, or you learn how to sort of put pitch decks together or financial models and forecasts together, budgets, all sorts of things that you need to sort of figure out that investors or government entities or other partners that you want to work with, they require. Like so there's a number of like crossover things, but there is quite a lot of things you have to learn that are completely new. So it's quite interesting. I do like the change, and I do like all the technical stuff that I've sort of been learning recently. So it's a nice sort of change of scenery as well, in a sense, going from financial services to transport and robotics and that sort of stuff. So it's been quite interesting.
Awesome. That's really cool. I like how you mentioned how, like, you have to be able to do a lot of different things. Like, essentially as an entrepreneur, you have to be a jack of all trades. And sometimes I think that can be quite overwhelming for people who want to come in and start a startup, because it's, one thing, you have to have a problem that you really understand and can work with. And then another thing is you just have to learn so much of things that you normally wouldn't delve into. And I'm really interested into what you think is a good next step that people could take. Like a small step that doesn't have to consider, like I have to start the startup straight away, but what can be like one small thing that I can do to start playing with this idea? And I might chuck it to Helena.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, there's loads of little things that you can do. I think the first is just being really curious and asking, like try and now's probably a good time because you're not as distracted by the world around you because you're sort of living in a bit of isolation, but really try and be.
Helena, I think you're cutting out a bit. Oops. We might move on to Leo, if that's okay, Helena, because we can't hear you at all at the moment.
Yeah. So I'll share a tip where I've got lots of ideas, right? I've got a Trello. If any of you guys use Trello, I've got a Trello board and it's full of just ideas. And
love that.
If it's a B2C idea, which is a business to consumer idea, you can very quickly test that by going to Reddit. I absolutely love Reddit and Product Hunt. And then find the subreddit that resonates with the problems that you try to solve, and just throw out there, and then just say, hey, I've been experimenting, or I've been having this particular problem, the problem you're trying to solve. How do you guys get by? How do you guys solve it? Can you send me some suggestions? And then from that, essentially that becomes your market research, and then you can use that to quickly pinpoint, first of all, find your competitors, if there's any competitors. Number two, find out if it's a real problem or not. If you don't get a lot of traffic or engagement on that post, you will know that, hey, maybe that it's not a problem, we try to solve. So for this, the Sloth app, which is the app got featured by Apple, we found that, people suffering from ADHD is the perfect target group because, they have this absolute particular problem. And when we post that question out there, there isn't many solutions out there. The closest thing was an app that was developed 5 years ago that was outdated. It has millions of downloads, people still using it, but if you look at the review, people will complain, hey, why isn't there update? From that essentially becomes our market research to say, hey, people are still using this, there's a lot of demand out there, let's build a better version of it. So
okay.
You
can
can
really looking into finding a problem, like no matter what it is, just focusing on that would be a good next step.
Just keep open mind, keeping finding, if you find yourself, like, just say, at work, during study, repeating something over and over, or something that really, really annoys you, don't just put up with it, because that's the last thing, the worst thing you can do, right? Go out there, if you're just, if you're, having so much issue with, like, say, Google Sheets or whatever study portal you have, go out there, do some research and see how other people are solving that problem. And throughout that process, not only you will learn, the technology, the market, but also figure out, hey, is this a problem?
Love that. Just make it better. Love that. So just a final question for everyone as we wrap up. What is an important trend that we'll be talking about at next year's Entrepreneurship Evening? So just a side note, last year, some of the speakers predicted AI, fintech, and one even suggested a new trend that in the tech industry, that they would take a break in 2020. And so with like COVID-19 and neobanks like up, they were pretty close. So no pressure. Over to you, Leo.
Okay, so now that COVID-19 has happened, I think definitely in the whole communication area, where how people can work remotely, I know there's a lot of existing solutions out there, but I think, they are definitely the ideal solution. There's a lot of room for improvement out there. So tools that help people and organizations work better. And there's, also on top of that, there's logistics. So, as people start, to live far away from the city, you have, the logistics in terms of, deliveries, logistics in terms of how to manage inventory. So I suspect there's definitely a growth on that front. And on top of that, AI is definitely not going away anytime soon. But what I want to say is, technology is always going to be, 5 to 10 years ahead of what people are actually using. So, AI has been around for a long, long, long time, but only very recently you see, the big companies start putting money and resource behind it. So by then next year, I think you'll get a much wider adoption of use of AI. You may see that through your daily lives or at work or at university. So that's what I think is going to happen next year.
Yeah, cool. So like a big trend would be people would start to work more effectively as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. And what about you, Shiraj? What are your thoughts on, the big trend that we'll be talking about next year?
Oh man, yeah, tough question. But look, I think I do like Leo's sort of ideas around, a push sort of for working from home, more sort of virtual collaboration software, things like Slack and Teams. We've been working on Teams, Microsoft Teams a lot. Push to the cloud, more sort of online services and deliveries. Obviously, streaming appears to be picking up rapidly with a decline in sort of fixed sort of pay TV, but more towards, streaming services. I also feel that there will be a push for, better healthcare and sort of telemedicine, that sort of stuff, virtual health, and better diagnostic tools, and sort of detection and curing of stuff, as well as I believe that there will be a push for, sustainable long-term sort of transport and electricity with the costs of, solar energy and that sort of stuff coming down rapidly, and the costs of batteries and electric batteries and that sort of stuff coming down really rapidly. I think people are realizing, there's these articles you see about pollution and being able to see the Everest from parts of northern India and stuff, which people haven't seen forever. And I think stuff like that, and being in traffic and congestion and all this stuff, and breathing in fumes and poison and gases and all that stuff, I think there will be a push for that sort of stuff over time. So yeah, hoping that some of those trends are mostly positive. So yeah,
that's good. So yeah, I love that. So a push for sort of more sustainable transport, and mirroring what Leo said from the work from home as well. That's really cool. And Helena, if you missed it, we were just talking about what important new trends that we would predict we'd be talking about next year at the same Entrepreneurship Evening.
Yeah, cool. I managed to catch everything. I've got 3 different internet phones and Wi-Fi that I tend to hop around all day. So maybe that'll be a trend, better internet. I've got like a couple. I think interestingly, and mine's going to be this is a non-tech trend, but I think the rise of old crafts is going to come back next year. I think a lot of people are going to be reconnecting with, carpentry and sewing and baking. I think people are going to start to enjoy those things that you do at home that is going to change, because I think most of us will be having a lot more time working from home in the future. So I think that'll be one non-tech thing that is going to change as a tech. And I think technology will actually help enable that and give people access. So sort of a new kind of era of industry there. I guess the other one that I had sort of wrapping up in that is, I think people's kind of adoption of biometrics might change around how we're tracked. I think the fact that we've all been locked down, and one of the sort of keys to not being locked down is sort of tracking humans and tracking human health. I think our sort of perception and attitudes towards that will change a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see what happens around that. And I think, yeah, the third is, and probably touching on that a little bit, is just like we're going to see a lot of things disappear. So I wonder if ATMs will exist in the future. I wonder if cash will even be something. My side hustle is I have a bar, a craft beer bar, and when we go back, I'm like, why accept cash? Like, we don't need to take cash anymore. So I think things like that, we're just going to see things disappear. We'll see door handles disappear. We'll see ATMs disappear. Just they'll design things out of our life that are potentially dangerous to us as human health.
Wow, that's so cool. Yeah, definitely interesting how like technology changes everything. And like Shiraj says, things like you said, like things will disappear, just like horses and horse meat from so long ago, like Shiraj mentioned. But that's really cool. And hopefully we can revisit this next year and see whether any of these trends come to life. I know that I can keep on talking forever because I love everything that you guys do, and I'm really obsessed with social entrepreneurship. But I'm aware that we have to wrap up soon. And so I'll just pass on to Jono, who will have some finishing remarks.
Thanks for that, Nathaniel. As Nathaniel mentioned briefly, my name is Jonathan Lee. I'm the Vice President of CCA. So I just wanted to very briefly give a massive, massive thank you to Helena, Leo, and Shiraj for your amazing presentations, but also a very insightful Q&A session. There were some really exciting things discussed, and I'm sure a lot of people here were very fascinated by the stuff that did come up. In fact, it's quite surprising to me personally that a lot of students are actually very interested in the entrepreneurial space. It's not something I expected as much, I guess, but I hope, and I'm sure that many of our attendees here tonight are either their own budding entrepreneurs or people who just want to get involved in their own startup at some point in their future careers. We hope this event provided a great platform for you guys to gain lots of great advice and some hints as to where to go next. I just wanted to say as well, Entrepreneurship Evening is a very special event for us here at CCA. This is only the second year we've done it, but if I remember correctly, within 1 week of starting our roles in the executive team, me, Aditi, Patrick, our IT director, and Tarun, our events director, we talked about Entrepreneurship Evening. It was the first thing we discussed, even though the event was months and months away. So we're really glad with how it turned out. Obviously not quite like we would have hoped without COVID, but still it was an amazing event all the same. So thank you once again to the speakers for your time. Thank you to Nathaniel, our wonderful, wonderful MC, who is an amazing entrepreneur in his own right and who really helped to guide the conversation tonight. And thank you everyone for attending. Before we go, I just wanted to give one last plug. We have one more event coming up this semester. It's going to be one of our more traditional networking events. Hopefully we'll have most of our sponsors attend, and you'll get some time to get some private time to talk and ask questions to some of the representatives from our amazing sponsors. So that's just about it. Helena, Shiraj, and Leo, if you could you just hang back for 5 minutes? We'll do one last thank you and a bit of a debrief, but otherwise to everyone else, thank you so much for attending, and we hope to see you guys next time.
Thanks, everyone.